Hey guys, welcome to our tutoring session here. We're going to be talking about final draft and screenplay formatting. I'm Jacob, and I'm very pleased to be here right now. This is going to be my first time doing this, so bear with me here. But yeah, so some preliminary things here. Basically, screenplay formatting is the building blocks of your story. It's what is important in terms of getting attention, because screenplays are just as important in terms of appearance and how people perceive them and read them, just as much as the story is. Because you could have a fantastic story, but you could also, have like it really poorly written, and no one's going to be interested in reading that. Like, they have script readers in Hollywood who they spend, hours a day reading like 50+ scripts, and your script comes across their desk and it's poorly written, and this formatting's all jumbled mess, and they just don't have the time for that, so they're going to toss that aside. Your probably brilliant screenplay is just going to go unnoticed. So these types of things, formatting, is extremely important, as you'll soon realize. So let's before I get into it, I'd like to go over a few rules that you must follow in terms of screenplay writing. The first one being, always write in the present tense. So, Anita goes to the market, or Anita takes a sip from her drink, not Anita drank her coffee, or Anita ran to the market. It's always whatever's happening in the present tense. So yeah, always make sure you do that. It's extremely important, because especially if you switch back and forth, which I have seen done before, and that's just really confusing as a reader and a writer, because it's just really confusing and bad form. So don't do that. Another thing, always write what's actually happening. I've seen countless screenplays that write about a character and what they're thinking, and there's a long paragraph about what the character's thinking in that moment. You don't want to do that. Screenplays are about what's actually happening on the screen. It's creating a frame that the director can use to kind of place the camera at certain points in that frame, to create the story. So yeah, nothing about the character's thoughts, always what's actually happening. And then the third thing I want to say is you want to avoid camera direction. I've seen this countless times as well. Directors in particular get really angry with screenplays that say, we pan across the frame to see this character doing whatever. They don't like that, and it makes sense, because that's what their job is. Their job is to place the camera. Their job is to create an interesting image, an interesting frame for which the movie can play out. Your job as a screenwriter is to write everything that's actually happening on screen, in the frame, not the camera direction, none of that. So yeah, that's just the things, the three main things that you guys got to focus on when you do these writing. When you do writing, because it's extremely important. So yeah, so I figured that we would go ahead and I'll show you a sample screenplay that I've been writing. It's not like an actual story or anything, but it should be a good example for you guys. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, so let's go ahead and open this up here and expand this. Hopefully you guys can see this all right. So this is just kind of an example for you of like a screenplay that I've been working on. And I'm going to go through all these elements. There's a lot of things to go through here with regards to what all these are. So let's go ahead and start with just talking about a script element. There's script elements, so let's see here. Elements. There's a bunch of different ones, but let's go over the core ones here. We've got general, scene heading, action, character, parenthetical, dialogue, transition, and then we also have shot and cast list. But these two, you're really not going to use them that much. These are mostly for production purposes. So, okay. How do I zoom in on here? Let's see. Oh yeah, that would make sense. Ah, there we go. Does that? I hope that helps there. So yeah, so we've got those were our script elements. These are the ones you'll be using the most. I don't actually use general ever because general is I mean, it's too vague. You want to be specific about what elements you're using. And what I mean by elements are, you'll see here in this sample that we've got all kinds of different looking lines. A screenplay is broken up into various lines. So we've got this. This is our slug line. And these are always what starts a scene. It's establishing the time, it's establishing the place, and it's establishing whether it's going to be inside or outside, so interior or exterior. And for some of you guys, this stuff might seem a little bit trivial and like too basic, but it's good stuff to review, go over again. And for those of you who haven't ever written a screenplay before, these are the basics, so you got to know this stuff. So for instance, in the beginning of this scene, we have interior diner day. So you just have the interior or exterior diner, which is where it's at, and then the time of day. You'll also notice at the beginning of the screenplay, before I even wrote a scene out here, I have this, which is over black. Now, over black is a transition. Remember we went over the different elements here, and one of those was transition. So you'll usually use transition for the beginning and the end of your script. I'm going to scroll all the way down here, and you'll see here that I have end. This is also a transition. So when you start your screenplay, you're going to want to start it with a transition. I chose to start it with over black. Now you could do over black, or you could do another popular one is fade in. And this is just to establish the start of the movie. Doesn't mean that your story is actually going to fade in at the beginning or be over black. This is just kind of the preliminary basic transition to tell everyone that you're going to start, over black or fading in. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably seen The Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings starts off with Galadriel speaking over black, and so the way you would write that is with over black, colon, and then you would write Galadriel and her dialogue in a voiceover. So that's how you're going to open this with the transition. Oh, nice. All right. Now let's go ahead and move on to what's probably going to be the most important part, which is your action lines. So this is all action. Action's referring to what's happening and not necessarily like in the traditional movie sense of action, like things exploding and guns being fired off and all that. It's mostly with regards to what's actually happening in the scene. So when you establish your scene with your slug line, you're going to want to set up, the kind of the feel, the atmosphere. I usually started out with maybe one or two words like cold, damp, dark, and like just creating those words is giving the reader a sense of where they're at, what tone this is setting. For this particular one, though, I just decided to write steam from the back kitchen wafts up along the ceiling as a waitress carries trays of food out to hungry customers. So, pretty basic establishing of the diner. So let's also go into a few other things with regards to action. Number one being you're going to be introducing the characters. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, shall we? So we've got Derek here. And this is our first time we're going to be seeing Derek, so I decided to put him in all caps. This is what you usually do. Unless there's like a side character that doesn't have like any dialogue or anything, you don't have to put them in all caps. But if it's a main character like Derek or Andrea in this case, you're going to put their name in all caps. You're going to give a short description of them. You're going to also tell their age. And I always put my age in parentheses. You can, some people I see write it by putting a comma there. But that's the way I do it. I think it looks really nice and neat. And again, this is kind of all about making your script look solid, very nice, neat, and to the point. So yeah, you want to describe your character into a long description about them. You know, describing their eye color, their hair color, what they're wearing, all this stuff. You don't need that. Just something short, sweet, and to the point. Because otherwise you're going to lose your reader pretty quickly there. They don't care about all that stuff unless it's really important. Like if in the third act of your script, Derek's eye color is important because there's multiple clones of Derek, and suddenly, you know, it's really important that he had that eye color because it's his defining feature, and Andrea's going to be able to recognize him based on that. That's important. That's why you would put his eye color. But otherwise, you just want to give a sense of who the character is. I put dark-haired and sullen. That's all you really need to know about him, is you get that he's kind of a depressed guy. And then you're describing what he's doing in the scene. Same for Andrea, you know, beautiful in her own way. That could mean many number of things, but you kind of get a sense of who these two are as they're sitting at the table together. Another thing that you want to do is you want to cap sounds. So I wrote this out here. A manner of racket can be heard. Spitting and coughing mixed with munching and laughing. One might mistake it for a bar were it not for the light 60s music playing over the speakers. So you'll notice that in this one paragraph here, I have many mentions of sound. And so you're always going to cap the actual sound itself and not the thing making the sound. So yeah, capping sound, that's really important. And I'll tell you why that's important. It pertains to production. When you get into pre-production on the film that you wrote or you're directing, or maybe you wrote and directed it, you're going to have an editor who's going to have a sound guy, and the editor is going to be going through the script with everyone and looking for these instances of sound, because he's going to determine whether or not he needs to actually record that sound live on the day, or whether they're going to need to do that in post, maybe on a Foley stage, or maybe have a pre-recorded sound of it already. So it's important to cap that, because it's going to make your editor, love you. So make his job a lot easier. And then the other thing you want to think about when you're writing your action lines is the use of capitalization. And what I mean by that is, if there's an important feature or object in the room, like say Derek's sitting at this table with Andrea, and there's I love using this example. It's completely ridiculous here, but like say there's a gun under the table, and that's really important because at the end of the scene, like Andrea's going to pull the gun on Derek. So you would want to use capitalization of the gun in that instance, because it's really important. It's something that the reader needs to take notice of. So when you're capping objects, you want to make sure that they're really important objects or important things. Like if a person has a certain like quirk about them, like they twirl their hair in a certain way, you can cap that. What you want to avoid though is overusing it. So just make sure that you don't overuse the capitalization of objects or actions. So that's actions. Let's see. We've also got character heading and dialogue. So let's move into that, shall we? So this is your character heading. Whenever you have a character speak, you always got to tell the audience, or the reader in this case, who is the person that's speaking. So in this case, it's Derek, and he says what. So that would be your dialogue. And there's also we use parentheticals sometimes to emphasize maybe he's angry in this case. So I could use the parenthetical to emphasize his feeling of anger in this scene. Like anything, though, in screenwriting, you don't want to overuse it. If you're constantly saying what the character's feeling in parentheses, first of all, that's not very good writing. It doesn't look great. And also, it's not good for the actors. The actors are creative people too, and when they read a script, there's many different ways they can play a scene. This scene alone can be played in like 5 different ways. So if I'm constantly putting parentheses about what the emphasis should be on each line, the actor is going to get angry, and they honestly won't want to participate in the project because they're going to feel stifled by the process. So it's all about using it very slightly. If a line has to be said a certain way, then definitely put a parenthetical there. But otherwise, don't bother with it too much. So another thing involving dialogue and character headings. You probably saw at the beginning we have this here, VO. So this stands for voiceover. So whenever you have a character speaking in voiceover, you guys have heard it a million times in movies, whether that be a dream sequence or something of the sort. That's how you would write that. You would put VO right next to the character's heading there. And there's actually a few others. Another one that can be used is OS for off-screen. Another one is OC. That's off-camera. But the two can be pretty much interchangeable. So I use off-screen sometimes, but typically I don't even bother with that because that's kind of a little bit of the director's choice anyways. So, but if you had a character in another room who was speaking and they were off-screen, and you could put OS. And then another thing we have, which is actually really neat. So you guys have probably seen 1.5 million movies where characters are talking over one another. So what a nice feature of Final Draft is we have dual dialogue. That's how you would format it. So if you had a funny scene where a cop's interrogating, these two after a long heist or whatever, and he asks them, what his name is or whatever, and they both answer at the same time. I don't know. And you wanted to write that. This is how you would do it. Is you would do a dual dialogue, which can be found in format. Pretty straightforward. Do we have any questions at this point? No? Okay. Cool. So let's go ahead and talk about another thing at the end of a scene. So how you end a scene typically is you're going to use what's called a button. In this case, I actually don't have one here. But let's look at this scene, for instance. Interior jail cell. At the end of this scene, we've got Derek scampering to his feet. Officer directs him to a phone, etc., etc. And then we move into the next scene. So in this scene, we just end with dialogue. Now, that's something you can do, but it's kind of a little bit sloppy. Why we use buttons is because it's a nice finish to the scene. It kind of feels complete. Like putting on a button, putting on a jacket and buttoning it up, whatever. If you want to finish off your scene, make it look nice, you want to include the button, which is the last action line. So we got Eric trips and falls as the police come into the diner. And you can change that, make it whatever you want. But the basic, what I'm trying to say with the use of a button is that it feels complete. Like this looks a lot nicer going into the next scene than this, where you just have the dialogue. But I've seen it written both ways, and it works sometimes. The reason you want to put that extra bit there, though, with regards to it looking nice, but also with regards to production, is when you're shooting the scene, like in post, they might decide to end the scene on that line. We got a runner, boom, to the next scene. But in this case, we don't want to just basically corner ourselves into doing it one way. So we add this extra line of Derek maybe tripping and falling, so they can shoot that on the day, and they have that to go to in case the cut on the line doesn't work. You're giving them options on ways to end the scene and not just limiting it to one way. They may not even use that. They may not shoot that on the day. They might just shoot her saying, "We got a runner," and say, "That's a wrap on the day," move on. But you, as the screenwriter, it's your job to make sure that they have that option in case that doesn't work out. Because you're writing this story, and it's your duty to make sure that it's told in the best way it can possibly be told. So I mentioned at the beginning of this session that there are rules that you must follow, but there's also rules that you should follow, which I say that you should follow them because they're no one's going to fault you for not following these rules, but they're going to make your script a lot better and probably save you a lot of hassle in terms of somebody who actually wants to read your script. The first one being what we call the rule of threes. Now, what does that mean? Well, you'll notice in the beginning of my script that I've got, in terms of lines, we got one line, two line, or one line, 2 lines here. We got 4 lines here, then we got 3 here, etc., etc. Well, the rule of threes basically means that you want to try and keep your action and dialogue to being around 3 lines and no more. The reason for this, and I'll show you what I mean. The reason for this is because if you have all these lines bunched up, like so, you get this wall of text, which feels so daunting as a reader, and you don't want to go through this huge wall of text. You just want to you want to skip over it, basically. And what if there's something important in there? What if there's the scene where Derek and Andrea have the gun under the table, and this is an important scene, and there's that moment in there, but they just skip right over it because they don't want to read this huge wall of text? Well, that's why we try and split it up into about 3 lines. Now, of course, you can go over this a little bit. 4 lines is fine. 5 lines is a little pushing it. Once you get to 6 and above, it becomes kind of ridiculous. So that's the rule of threes. It also pertains to dialogue. I have Andrea here. She says this long line that's like 6 or so, lines, but I split it up by saying she stands up from the booth. And that's all I needed to do, is I just put one simple action line in there, and it splits up the dialogue and makes it a lot easier to read. The other rule, another rule for you is, I'm sure you might have heard this before, but it's show, don't tell. I have read countless scripts where a character is saying exactly what they're feeling. They're saying, "Oh, I'm so upset that I didn't get the job that I always wanted," and all this, and like, that's great. And I've seen movies get made with that kind of dialogue. That's fine, but it's really annoying because as an audience member, we can pretty much, for the most part, piece things together. We're very intelligent for the most part. And so if you start telling us everything we need to know about the scene, you're not trusting your audience to actually figure it out. So what you want to try and do is you want to come up with clever ways to show what your character's feeling. A great example of this is if a character's really depressed because he just got laid off, and he went to Central Park, he's sitting out in the park feeding the pigeons, and he's throwing the feed to them, and then he just stops. And he sits there for a couple seconds, and then the seed just drops out of his hand and just hits the ground. That's just like, we get it from that action alone that he's upset. Something is bothering him because he was a few seconds ago feeding the pigeons. It's weighing on his mind. So this is just an example of what I'm talking about. Just show us. Don't tell us everything we got to feel. The third thing I'm going to point on really quickly, and then I'm going to answer a question here, is following the 3-act structure. Now, if you guys haven't paid attention or looked at our other sessions that we've done, definitely check out Elliot Campos, my associate, did a really great session on the process of writing and stuff. And the 3-act structure is really important. Of course, you can break this a little bit. But what I like to go through is kind of what the general guideline is for pages in the 3-act structure. So we say that in a 120-page script, typically the first act is 30 pages, the second act 60, and the third act is 30 again. Some of you, I think, have been learning from Ron, and I think Ron teaches the 4-act structure, which is basically just splitting the third act into 2 pieces, or I'm sorry, the second act into 2 pieces. And so in that case, you would just do 30 for each additional act. So let's go ahead and get into some of these questions here. The first being, from Terry, what is the difference between Final Draft and Celtics? So for those of you who don't know, Celtics is an additional screenwriting software that's free. So Final Draft does cost a bit of money, but the major difference between Final Draft and Celtics is that Celtics doesn't always do the formatting for you. Final Draft does. Like, pretty much if I try and edit something on here, you know, like, it does it for me. It figures it out. I just hit enter here, and it automatically puts it as an action line. Sometimes Celtics, when you're writing and you hit enter, will keep it like it'll just enter, but it'll still be part of the dialogue line. And that's frustrating because when I'm reading a script and I notice those things, I immediately think, well, that's probably someone writing on Celtics, because it doesn't do that thing for you. So it's free, and that's fantastic, but you have to do a little bit more work with it. You have to actually know the formatting techniques so that you can know when Celtics is screwing it up for you, so that you can correct it and make it look nice and neat. So that's the major difference. If you use Celtics, I'm not dogging on it. I mean, it's a great piece of software, and it's great for people who can't afford Final Draft. I mean, that's great. But Final Draft is the industry standard. So if you want to be a screenwriter, at some point, I think you really need to think about investing in Final Draft. But that's that. Let's move on to another question here. So Caitlin asks, what's the difference between a master scene and secondary scenes? So a master scene, the master scene, I would say, is just the primary. It's a little bit shaky, but basically it's the primary scene of your main character. Secondary scenes are additional scenes to move the story along. But yeah, master scenes and secondary scenes, I would say that's the major difference between them, is that the master scene is about like moving your main character's story forward, and the secondary scene's about all the additional stuff, if that helps at all. So I did want to touch on something else really quickly here while we're getting this next question, but we've got, okay, so right here, you guys probably saw this, super. So what is a super? Basically, a super is a title. When you see a movie, like I think Les Miserables used a lot of these, to establish the place and the time as a title card, that's how you would write it. So you would put super in all caps, colon, and then write out, you know, the place, the time, whatever necessary details there are. You can use titles for all kinds of things. What you don't need to use a super for is for your opening title, for the title of your movie. And the reason for that is because you have a title page. So you don't necessarily need to make a super for that. I have seen directors who write, like Quentin Tarantino does this, but Quentin Tarantino is Quentin Tarantino. He's sold, you know, he's really made a name for himself, so he knows he doesn't have to follow this exactly. He's made a name for himself, so he can kind of do whatever he wants and get a pass on it. So let's go ahead and answer this next question. If you use a quote to open the page preceding fade in, is that page considered the title page or page 1? So let me see if I get this correctly here. Use a quote to open the page preceding fade in. Oh, okay. I get what you're saying. So you're saying before this, like if you had something before the fade in here, I think if you have a quote to open your movie, I have seen it done on a separate page, like before you do fade in. But usually, what you'll do is you'll put over black, and you'll put the quote here. Let's see. This would actually be a great time to use general. So use the general, or let's actually just do action. I'm telling you, I don't really ever use general. It's not that useful. And then you'll put the quote. So this is a quote. This is a quote from Donnie Darko. I know, dreary, right? Anyway, and so you would put that, and then you put, you know, dash whoever said it, and then you'd put, you know, fade in or cut to. Like you guys have probably noticed I put cut to here. This is another transition. I don't like using it though, because cut to oftentimes gets used too much, and it's kind of an editorial term to cut to something. So I don't like to use it, but in this instance, because it's over black, I did decide to use cut to. But you could also do fade in right after over black. It's just up to you. But that's how you would do if you wanted to have a quote at the beginning of your movie to kind of establish like a mood. A great short film that uses this, by the way, check out Spider. It's a really great film, and I think the opening is it's all fun and games till someone loses an eye. Mom. So yeah, check that out. It's a great. Oh, and thank you, Mark, for saying that, for asking that question. Thanks, Mark. So the next question here, let's see. And who's this one from? From Kristen? Kirsten, I'm sorry, Kirsten. All right, and Kirsten asks, what should I do when there are two sets of people talking and I want the audience to overhear one set while mainly focus, while the main focus stays on the other set. Okay. You want the audience to overhear one set while it stays on the other set. Okay, so what I think you're talking about is intercutting, but I could be wrong about that. So I'm going to go over what intercutting is, and then if I didn't answer your question, please let me know. So, like, for instance, if you have, in this script I wrote that Derek gets a phone call from this woman named Willa. And so what you do to establish that they're having a conversation in two different places is you're going to establish the first scene, the first location. So interior jail cell, I go through that entire scene, and then I move on to exterior private garden, and Willa, you know, flips open her iPhone, and then I'm going to write intercut dash telephone conversation. Now I've already established the two locations that this is happening at. So this basically tells your crew that the conversation is happening in two different locations, so it's going to be needed to be filmed on 2 different days. You know, like all of Derek's dialogue here is still a part of scene 3 up here. So that's how you would do that, intercut. And this is a scene heading, if you're wondering, not an action line. But you could do it as an action line if you want. It's just, I think it looks better as a scene heading. So that's how you would do that. I hope that answers your question. If not, please let me know. Next question. Let's see. Is there a discount on Final Draft available to us? Says Stacy. To students, yes. If you're not a student, call admissions. I know that I actually got the question about that the other day too. And just to make sure you guys are aware, because I've actually had this question come up. Final Draft and Final Cut are not associated with each other. Final Cut is an editing software provided by Apple. Yeah, it's all good. Final Cut is associated with Apple. It's an Apple product, and so if you want a discount on Final Cut, let myself or Elliot, your advisor, know, and we can get you your student enrollment verification, and you can take that to them, and that'll get you a discount. But with regards to Final Draft, because it's not Apple related, yes, you can get one. I would have to check on how exactly you do that. Yeah. But if you're not a student, definitely like call admissions about that. Cool. So let's go over a few other things here, a few like miscellaneous stuff. So I want to go over something called mini slugs. So I already mentioned that when you start your scene, you're going to start it with a slug line, which is interior diner day or exterior roof, whatever. But if you want to do a mini slug, what a mini slug is a continuation of a sentence in your action line. So let's say, this isn't going to make sense here because Derek's sitting at a table, but Derek climbs out of his car and walks into a diner where he finds Andrea waiting for him. So you see what I did there, where I have the sentence just going. So Derek climbs out of his car and walked into a, and then we have diner separated from that sentence in all caps. And that's basically just indicating that this is a new slug line without creating the entire slug line, the interior diner day. We don't need all that. And to be honest, it's going to slow it down. It's going to slow the action down. This is extremely important, I think, to use during action scenes of all things. Like if there is a really important thing that's happening across town and Derek has like 50 seconds to get it, or not 50 seconds. All right, let's give him like 10 minutes to get over there. And it's like an hour-long drive. So he's got to like book it. So he rushes out of the diner and into the street, and using a mini slug for street. This is to keep the action moving so that your scene keeps going and the reader doesn't get bogged down by constant slug line after slug line after slug line. They're going to get bored of that, and that's when you get tossed. So using mini slugs in action is actually really important, and I would highly recommend it. It's not necessary. It's not necessary to use mini slugs, but I think they'll be very helpful. So that's what a mini slug is. Always make sure that you continue the sentence past the mini slug. Like it should never end with he walks into a diner, period, like that. It should always just keep going. So Derek does this where he finds Andrea waiting for him. Just try and continue the sentence. Let's go ahead and answer another question here from David. Is that right? David. I'm sorry. It looks like an R. Anyway, so how do you format flashbacks and montages? Great question, actually. So for flashbacks, let's see here. I'm just going to go ahead and start a new scene. Interior. Subway. Okay. So we got our log line, or our slug line, excuse me. Then you got your action line, and then let's say a flashback begins. So what we do is we put this as a scene heading, begin flashback, colon, and then you start doing the flashback sequence. Actually, let me rephrase this because that's going to get confusing. Let's just start with begin flashback. Now let's establish where we're at in the flashback. Interior, subway. And you guys see what I mean about how it automatically formats it for me. Like I was just typing as an action line interior, and immediately it knew I was talking about a scene heading. So that's the benefit you'll get with Final Draft versus Celtics. But anyway, evening. Okay, so then we got, a lot of stuff happens, and then we're ready to come back to the present. So what do? We put end flashback. Oh, it's not a good day for me with writing, guys. So that's how you'll do that. Begin flashback and end flashback. For montages, it works the same way, but with a montage, unless if it's in the same location, like say this dude's getting trained in this facility and it's a montage sequence. What you'll do is you'll put dash marks and you'll put Derek trains on the treadmill, and Derek does this, and you'll keep doing that, and then you'll put end montage. So they work the exact same way. It's going to be begin flashback and end flashback, begin montage, end montage. But if your montage isn't all in one location, then you'll want to put the slug lines. You'll put slug line this, Derek does this, next slug line, he does that. So I hope that answers your question. Let's actually, oh, I'm sorry, I missed one there. This is from Rick. How do you format text messages and emails? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do this, as with anything in this. So I'll just give you one way to do it. Let's say Derek gets a text message up here. So if Derek, the way I like to do it, just because I don't like to keep cutting away from the action and putting slow lines and stuff in there, but here's one way to do it. So it could operate in the same way that a mini slug works, where you have Derek answers his phone, and then you would write he sees, and you could write hey Derek, Andrea, smiley face. I don't know. So that's one way you could do it. Another way you could do it is by writing, let's see. It's been a long time since I've done these. So actually, with regards to, that's the one I would recommend to you. If you don't like that way of doing it, I would recommend either asking your mentor about it or Googling it, because there are a lot of different ways to do that. But putting down he sees this and putting it in quotes, you could do that. You could put Derek's email reads, hey, what's up? So you can do that as well. But bottom line is that I like to always keep the keep it in the action line, in the action lines themselves, and not actually have to do too many separations of slug lines, begin. I don't like doing flashbacks a lot in that way because of the begin flashback and montages. I like to avoid those whenever possible. I hope that helps. Sorry I couldn't answer it a little bit more in depth. I haven't actually used that in a long time, so but I hope that helped you a little bit. Let's go ahead and go over title page, because that's kind of important too, since it's going to be the first thing that someone sees of your screenplay. Let's see, I gotta zoom in on this too. Where did I go to zoom in? Zoom. Okay. So you've got your title page, and on Final Draft, it is separate from your actual page. So you have to go to wherever I went for that. Tools, production. Anyway, I think it's formatted differently because I'm actually on the title page itself. But I'm sure you guys have seen title pages before if you've ever read a screenplay. But if you haven't, no big deal. It's basically formatted in this way, with some exceptions, depending on how you want it to look. Like, some people like to have their title itself in like a creative, interesting font that's like really blown up and expanded. But I excuse me, I prefer it this way, because it's a lot simpler and straightforward and not distracting at all. So I just titled this The York Project. And you'll probably, if you have Final Draft, you'll notice that it centers it on the page here. And the way I've always been taught to do is to move it up slightly. That it looks a little bit better if it's moved up slightly. So try and move it up a little bit. And then I like to have one line between each of these lines. So York Project line by line, and then your name. And you'll notice I also put inspired by true events. So there's a few ways you could do this. Inspired by true events, I usually just put it as it is. If it's based on, you'll want to put it in parentheses. You could also do that for inspired by, but I don't know. I kind of find that it's interesting to differentiate the two, which I hope you guys know that when you have based on something, you have to have the rights to that. Because if you are basing it on a book or on a comic or whatever, you got to have the rights to that material. You cannot sell that screenplay without it. So that's going to be like the first thing they ask. Inspired by, that's a little bit more lenient. So just consider that when you're writing out inspired by or based on. And then, of course, down here, you're going to write your draft. Now, I've said this to several of my students, but you're going to be on your first draft until you sell that thing, or you get a producer interested who's going to ask you to write more drafts. The reason for this is because once production hits, you're going to be writing more and more drafts as you're going along through production. So your first draft that you hand into someone is always your first draft. Even if you have written, like in preparation for this, written like 10 other drafts, it's still your first draft. It's always your first draft until someone buys it. I'll talk to you a little bit about production if we have time. But yeah, that's first draft. And then, of course, down here at the bottom, you want to have contact information. The way they used to do it is you would put your address and your phone number and your email address, or whatever, before email address. So it would just be your address and your phone number. And this was so that they could have somewhere to ship the script back to you if they were interested, or ship you a rejection letter or whatever. Now, because of the internet and everything, you don't actually have to include your address. But I like to, because what if they want to send me a nice rejection letter, handwritten or something like that? I'd like to get that. Anyway, but yeah, it's really important to just put your contact information, mainly your phone and your email, because that's how they're going to be able to contact you if they're interested. So you want to make sure you have that. Okay, let's answer another question here, shall we? What's the difference between TV and movie screenplay formatting? So there's not a whole lot of differences, but in TV, you have acts. You have acts in movies too, but you have act breaks. You probably see these on network television in the form of commercials. And so what you want to do in a television screenplay is you want to include your acts. So you would start your screenplay with, let's see if I can get this. Um, it's not supposed to be a character heading, but I'm going to just do that for right now. Act 1. And then you'd write, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, to be fair, you would actually start your script out with teaser. Because you want to start your script with a teaser. Every even in cable, they do teasers, but they don't have commercial breaks and stuff in cables or in premium cable. So I think that's the major difference between TV and movies. You know, because television is changing so much, there's so many like functions that you wouldn't see normally on television. Like you wouldn't see a whole lot of like over black monologue bits in television, but you could see that in modern day television. So I think that's the main difference. Thanks for the question, Bryce. Hope that helps you a little bit. Yeah, TV, that's an undertaking. I mean, because you're not writing just a screenplay. You're writing a pilot, which is something that's going to take you into a series. So you're really not just writing one script. You're writing, hopefully, years and years worth of scripts. You're just creating basically the blueprint for your series, what people expect to see in all of them. So, Danielle, oh yeah, Danielle asks, who's your favorite screenwriter and why? I don't want to do a cop-out answer. Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of a cop-out answer, but my favorite screenwriter is Aaron Sorkin. If you guys don't know who that is, Social Network, A Few Good Men, the recent Steve Jobs movie. The guy's really good at capturing moments, particularly in The Social Network. He really knows how to create like how a scene is supposed to work, and he actually has talked about this, is how he went to the theater a lot as a child, and he actually started in the theater. He wrote A Few Good Men as a stage show, and then he adapted it into a screenplay. That's really how he got started out here. But the guy, he really understands how people talk to each other, the escalation of a scene. And I think he's just really fun. Like you watch bless you. You watch like The Newsroom. He did The Newsroom, and the dialogue's very witty. And I mean, I'm a sucker for dialogue. Who isn't? But I think that he really manages to marry the dialogue to either the tension of the scene, the comedy of the scene, and keep it moving and keep it interesting. I've just been always impressed. I have not seen the new Steve Jobs movie, but I've heard really good things about it. So I have to check that one out. But yeah, Aaron Sorkin. So hope that helps. Thanks, Danielle. Are screen doctors worth it? Asks Keenan. Hard to say. I had a teacher that was a screen doctor, and he always recommended it to new screenwriters because it's the same as like in books they have editors who kind of like they comb through your entire manuscript and figure out like what's wrong with this stuff. Sorry, I'm getting okay. Our script doctors, okay. That's fine. But kind of lost my train of thought there. Anyway, in books they have editors who kind of like clean things up, and script doctors, I think they can be helpful. There's a really famous Good Will Hunting. Good Will Hunting. One of my teachers was the script doctor for that, and she told me, all these stories about talking with Damon and Affleck about changing this and changing that, because if you read the original script of that, which I don't know if it's out there or not, but if you can get a hold of it, you'll see what I mean when I say that they had something really good there, but they needed to refine it, and they needed to cut out some scenes that just weren't necessary, take out some characters that just weren't necessary, and yeah, I just think it's going to be a case-by-case basis. If you have someone that'll do it for free and and you trust, that's the way to go. But if you don't have that and you can get yourself someone to look at it and they have to get paid for it, that's fine too. Yeah, I've never utilized one. I've never utilized a script doctor. But then again, I haven't sold anything, so maybe that's saying something. No, but just weigh the pros and cons of it. In my opinion, they're worth it in the long run. Just look into it. Do your research. So there. Do we have enough time for me to go over a few more things here? Okay, I'm just gonna fly through a few more things here. I wanted to go over with you guys here a few things about production. These are things that you won't really need to know as much about until you actually get a script sold. But Final Draft has these neat ways of utilizing it for production. So when a producer or whoever is interested in buying your script or optioning it, you're gonna lock the script. Basically, what this means is you'll go into production, you'll lock pages, and it's going to enter into revision mode. So you might notice on the sidebar here we have asterisks, and these asterisks are indicating when changes have been made in your script. This is helpful because then the producer doesn't have to go through the entire script. Again, they can go straight to the problem areas and see how you fixed them. Maybe you didn't fix them for the better or whatever. And when you do that, when you go into revision mode and you do all this, it's going to be changed to a different color. So you guys might have seen, I don't know if you guys watch behind the scenes at all, but there's stuff of directors and writers and actors looking through scripts, and they're like green pages and pink pages and stuff like that. When you go on to different drafts, they're going to print out different color pages for each different draft. And the reason they do that is to make sure that that everyone, all the key crew members, all the crew members are on the same page about where you're at. So basically the color coding goes like this, and you guys don't need to remember this. In fact, you can even Google this. It's not that important, but it's basically white, blue, pink, yellow, green, goldenrod, buff, salmon, cherry, tan, ivory, white, again, double white, and so on and so forth. So after a certain point, they double up. They go double white, double blue, double pink. It's ridiculous. If you get to that point in your script writing, I mean, you got to consider, whether the script's even gonna work. But yeah, that's production, and there's all other types of things. There's scene numbers. Like I went ahead and numbered the scenes in here. But like most of this is actually going to be done by your producer, your first AD. They're going to number the script so that they know what scene numbers they're shooting on what days when they make the schedule. So yeah, that's just a bunch of production stuff. I mean, if you buy Final Draft, go ahead and look through it. Mess around with it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and unlock these pages. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward, guys. So yeah, this is just, to get you guys started. There's all kinds of stuff involved in script writing and script formatting. But I wanted to go through all this with you because I noticed so many times professionals and amateurs that screw up script writing, formatting, and it's really depressing to read a draft like that, because I always give it the benefit of the doubt unless it's really boring, but most people won't. And so I want you guys to have the best shot of selling your script and getting your script read by people, because when there's 50 plus scripts, on someone's desk in a day, they really gotta decide which ones are worthwhile. So for more, contact your advisor or admissions, and if you're unable to make the Hangout live, send questions to submit@rrfedu.com. I'll repeat that again. Submit@rrfedu.com. It was a pleasure helping you guys out. As always, I hope this was helpful for you, and I'll see you again next time.